Most beginner workouts are way too complicated, and I'm going to tell you exactly how you can fix that. Using the 5x5 method is a tried and tested way of increasing your weight and your volume over time. To put it simply, 5x5 is just a set and rep scheme. So it's 5 sets of 5 reps on whatever given exercise you are executing. Now, it works best on exercises like squat, bench, deadlift. Any kind of compound movement, it's going to really shine on. There's no reason why you couldn't use it for a smaller single joint movement, but typically we're going to be using heavier weights on this method, and depending on what you're trying to achieve, that might not be best for you at that time. 5x5 is already a popular method used in loads of programs like Starting Strength, Strong Lifts 5x5, and a ton of others. So I'm not surprised if you've already seen it floating about in some program, or maybe you've already tried it yourself. There's a few reasons why I love 5x5 for beginners and why I'm making this video. It's quick, it's easy, and it's simple. Like, you can prescribe it to anyone and they can understand it. They can understand the progression. They can look at where you can go, right? Week from week. I can show somebody 5x5, it's 25 total reps. We're not going to change the volume at all. You're going to do a 12-week cycle, let's say, and over that 12 weeks, every week you're doing your 5x5 on bench press. Now, we're going to try and add, you're brand new to the gym, we're going to try and add 2 to 5 kilo per week. And what we'll find is at the beginning, we're probably going to be able to get a lot closer to 5 kilo per week. And this is on your working sets. So we're never actually going up to a maximum here, we're just doing the 5 rep sets. Now, explaining that to someone, it's very simple to understand. We go in, we do the exact same thing, we add a little bit of weight, just classic linear progression, okay? Normal progressive overload. Now, where the 5x5 can start getting a little bit more complicated, we can start implementing other kinds of methods to go alongside it and help it progress. So the method, or the progression, sorry, that I just described to you about the 12-week cycle, 2 to 5 kilo progressions. Now, after X amount of time, that's going to become unsustainable. Now, the only way to kind of break through that plateau is addressing it. We can't just ignore it. We can't just hope it's going to go away. So there's obviously a handful of approaches. There's lots of tools in the toolbox for any coach or any athlete, if you take the time to learn them, that can help us kind of get over that plateau. Now, my favorite when it comes to the 5x5, if I start to see slowing down, or I may even implement this prior to seeing this. I might just throw it in right at the beginning. But on the secondary day, that week of the same movement, if you're not already doing that, then you should add it in. But on that secondary day, you need to do some kind of heavier work. Because 5 reps, yeah, it's heavy. It's a lot heavier than a set of 10, a set of 12. But 5 reps is still not exposing you to the 90% kind of ranges, okay? 85, 90% ranges. You're staying around 70 to 80% for 5x5. In terms of your actual capability at that time, obviously we have to bear in mind that's going to move week to week as you progress as an individual and get stronger. Now, that 7x2, that weight doesn't need to change. That could stay the same, right, over the 12-week or however long you want to introduce it for. The aim is every week when you approach it, it becomes easier, okay? So you might throw it in on week 1 with a 85% load. I've just pulled that number out of thin air there. Of your 1 rep max or something like that, if your 5x5's at 70%. So we can see there's like a 15% difference there. It's quite a jump. And in theory, the 85% is going to feel tough. It's going to feel heavy. You're going to notice there's a little bit of weight on there, but it's doable. And you're just going to do the same thing every week. The execution should look better. The rest times could be lowered, but ideally it's just exposing you to that heavier weight. And what that's doing is it's letting us get some technique work in. Like I've said multiple times now, it's exposing you to the heavier weight. So that does a number of things, right? It unlocks mental kind of blocks you might have if you're scared of X weight. It can help you learn how to kind of strain under weight. It does a whole host of things, okay? But it works really well with the 5x5. So bringing that in, giving a beginner a little bit of exposure to heavier weights once they start to initially plateau is great. Every single coach, every single person that's starting lifting should be doing this, okay? So just to kind of progress on the example I gave you earlier with the bench press, I'm just going to kind of structure that workout so you can get an idea of what a day using a 5x5 would look like, or should look like, in my opinion. Now, just bear in mind before I disclose this, this is based off my coaching philosophy. This is how I design a workout, and it's my kind of way of thinking. So this is not necessarily right, and it's not necessarily the only way to approach it. You need to try and give it a go and find kind of your own flavor, find what works for you. And that's what you do over time. And over the course of 10, 20 years of lifting, that's what makes you an exceptional, gym goer, if you like. You're going to really find what works for you then, and you're going to excel. So anyway, we're going to start with the bench press, say 5x5 on the 5x5 day, okay? So that's the first day. I'll give you an example of the 7x2 as well, but 5x5 bench. After that, we're going to do some kind of supplementary movement that's going to support the bench press. Now, depending on the weakness of the lifter, it's going to change, right? Say you're struggling to stabilize your bench. Maybe we're going to do some back movement immediately after the bench, okay? Because that could take higher precedence in our order of training, in our order of exercise here, if that's like high on the priority list. Whereas if you're just weak on the bench and we need to kind of just make your pressing strength, bring that up, we could throw in dips, weighted dips or something like that immediately after. But then there's also other trains of thought there, because you could try to bring in, like, you may want to work antagonistic muscle groups, like one after the other. So rather than going bench into dips, where you're already holding some fatigue from the bench and you don't want to take that straight into your dips, you could then obviously put the back movement in. So personally, I would probably put the back movement in. And that's what I tend to do for beginners. So we've got the bench 5x5, maybe barbell rows. Okay, that's a good movement. And you can do any kind of variation of that, or just any kind of row. Now, after that, we could probably look at either doing a tertiary movement, or you could go straight into your accessories, depending on how tired you were, depending on what you decided to do, and really just, it's up to you on the day. Your tertiary movement could look like another kind of compound movement, or you could go straight into some kind of accessory work. So typically, after, let's say you've done the tertiary movement, you're going to do at least 2 to around 4 accessories. You could push that up to 5 if you've got a good level of GPP, but for a lot of like most people, once you've got through a tough 5x5, a secondary movement, a tertiary movement maybe, or at least a couple of accessories, you're going to want to get out of the gym if you've put a sufficient amount of effort into that training. If you feel as though that was easy, I promise you now you've not trained hard. That is a solid session for anyone. It's a lot of volume. Unless you bear in mind here, with these accessories, we need to be doing 2 to 3 sets minimum. We can't be doing any one set, 5 rep stuff here, because then you're just going to tell me I'm wrong. It needs to be a sufficient workload, but if you just use a little bit of common sense, it's always going to be. And if we always start out with that 5x5, that really blasts you at the start of the session, and it doesn't leave you with a great deal of energy for the rest of the day. Now, there's a couple of myths I wanted to dispel actually about the 5x5, because it's commonly said by a lot of people that it's not to be used by advanced lifters. And if you actually asked AI about 5x5, it would give you the response that it's not to be used by advanced lifters, or, kind of like intermediates past the halfway point, if you like, because people spend a lot of time there. But the 5x5 can be used at any level. It doesn't matter. There's nothing inherently wrong with the 5x5. All it is a set and rep prescription. It could be 4x6. It could be anything, 3x7. It's just numbers at the end of the day. 5x5 is just a good kind of like placeholder value, if you like. It's like 3 sets of 10. Why do we use 3 sets of 10? I've done separate videos on kind of like why we actually use 3 sets of 10. There's a little story behind that, but you can go and find that. But yeah, 5x5, it's just a good general prescription. It's 25 total reps, and that's why we use it. But it's not wrong at any point for anyone. Now, I've actually got proof of this myself because I used 5x5 at a certain point in the build up, the run up to me squatting 265 kilo at about 107 kilo body weight. So it definitely works. You know, I was able to total 700 kilo in a powerlifting competition. And some of that was definitely due to the 5x5s, the brutal sets of 5x5s with low rest times. That is honestly some of the hardest training you could do, especially if you're already somebody who's strong and lifting good weights. Let's say you did a 5x5 with, 140 kilos squat. It's not easy. And if you're doing 60 seconds rest, it's really not easy. It can be some of the hardest sets you've probably done on a lot of exercises. So 5x5 is great. You can use it at any point, and you probably should be using it if you're watching this video. So if you've got any questions, put them down below. I'm more than happy to answer. I love helping you guys out. And talking about helping you out, I've got a free app. I made it myself, right? Okay, it took me a while. I put some effort into it, so I appreciate if you go and check it out. Give me some feedback, even if it's bad. I don't care. I want to make it really good. The app's completely free. It's on the App Store. Forge Fit, but I'll link it in the description anyway. Hope you guys have a good day. I appreciate you clicking on the video, and I will see you in the next one.